In a desert town in eastern Chad, tens of thousands of people are arriving, fleeing a brutal war, a civil war in Sudan, as the world's worst humanitarian crisis unfolds in front of us. The Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists Anne Applebaum and Lindsay Addario captured stories and images from this crisis for The Atlantic this week, noting that once these desperate refugees arrive in Chad, quote, due in part to the Trump administration's devastating cuts to foreign aid, only a skeleton staff of international humanitarian workers are on hand to receive them. There are shortages of food, water, medicine, and shelter, and few resources to move people anywhere else, end quote. A civil war has been raging in Sudan for 2 years. Tens of thousands of civilians have been killed in this current conflict, which erupted after a joint coup when the previously allied Sudanese Armed Forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, better known as the RSF, began fighting for control of the capital. Both the Sudanese Armed Forces, which controls the government, and the RSF have international backing. And they've both been accused of committing atrocities and war crimes, including murdering civilians, mutilation, torture, and a litany of arbitrary arrests and rape. The RSF has also been accused of genocide, recruiting child soldiers, and additional crimes against humanity, including persecution on ethnic or gender grounds and the large-scale abduction of women who were then forced into sexual slavery. According to the United Nations, more than 12.7 million people have been forcibly displaced from their homes, more than 5 million of them children. This is the world's largest displacement crisis. Across the world right now, of all the people who face catastrophic hunger levels, and there are a lot, half are in Sudan, according to the World Food Program. Two international organizations that formally monitor hunger declared last summer that a famine was underway at the Zamzam displaced persons camp in Darfur, which held an estimated 700,000 people until mid-April, when it was attacked by the RSF. The UN estimates 400 people were killed and 400,000 were forced to flee. Joining me now, the Pulitzer Prize-winning photojournalist and my friend Lindsay Addario, and the Pulitzer Prize-winning historian and also my friend, the staff writer for The Atlantic, Anne Applebaum, who wrote the introduction to Lindsay's new photo essay in The Atlantic, The Crisis of American Leadership Reaches an Empty Desert, photographs from the humanitarian disaster in Sudan and Chad. This article offers a first-hand account of the situation in a small desert town in Chad, one of the places which has seen a giant influx of people who are seeking refuge since the fighting again intensified in mid-April. It also offers an on-the-ground view of the consequences of the Trump administration's cuts to foreign humanitarian aid program. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here, and thank you so much for continuing to tell the story, because this is one of those stories that falls off every table all the time. We see it and we want to talk about it, and then something else happens. So we're putting this in the center of the table now. And you perfectly encapsulate the situation and the importance of what Lindsay has achieved here in your writing, where you say, quote, the photos below capture the desperation of people with nowhere to go, the absence of infrastructure to help them, the desolation of the empty desert. This is a dramatic moment in a devastating war. More people have been displaced by violence in Sudan than in Ukraine and Gaza combined. Statements about Sudan are regularly made at the UN and in international forums, and yet the people in these photographs seem to have been abandoned in an empty landscape. As the United States withdraws and international institutions decay, their ordeal may be a harbinger of what is to come. And those are dramatic words about a yet more dramatic situation.
I think the most dramatic thing about the photographs that Lindsay took and the place that she visited, which is Tinea in eastern Chad, is the fact that this was a predictable crisis. We could see it coming. When I was in Sudan some weeks ago, there was constant talk about this particular camp. You mentioned it in your introduction, the Zamzam camp. Everybody knew that it could be attacked. Everybody knew that it could collapse, that people could be escaping. And even though we knew it was coming, the international community was simply not prepared. And they're not prepared in part because the way in which the Trump administration chose to end USAID and to cut U.S. aid programs was so chaotic and so rapid that even international institutions who didn't know they were dependent on logistics or on trucking companies paid for with American money were caught unawares. And there is simply not enough material. There aren't enough people. There isn't a staff available in Eastern Chad. Lindsay can tell you herself, but she spoke to UN officials there who said, I've been told that giving people shelter doesn't count as a critical supply. Therefore, I don't have any shelter to give people. I have people on my staff who are going to be fired in a few weeks. Really, nobody's able to prepare. Nobody's able to cope, even as I say, with something that we knew was coming.
Lindsay, the humanitarian displacement crisis stemming from the Sudanese civil war, the largest in the world at this point. 3 years in, the story, as we said, flies well under the radar. Thankfully, we've got your pictures, and they capture the desperation. You've covered crises across the world. Describe to us what you saw and what you heard firsthand.
I mean, ironically, I covered Darfur 20 years ago. I worked there for 5 straight years, and here we are back again in Tinea. And I would say I was in a situation where it was over 100 degrees, roughly 3,000 people are crossing a day, some with gunshot wounds, all dehydrated. I spent a few hours at one point at the border, and there were up to 25 malnourished women and children who came across in that short period. People are coming sort of broken. They're telling stories of there were 2 boys whose mother died of thirst along the way, and they just left her under a tree because no one has the means or the energy to do anything. No one has any food, anything to drink. When they arrive, the UNHCR is operating at 9% of its budget. They don't have vehicles. They don't have trucks to move people. They don't have shelter. And anyone who's been in over 100-degree heat in Africa without shelter knows it is necessary to save people's lives, to have some sort of shade and food and water.
And the journey to Tinea can be deadly and harrowing for those who make it. Now, because of these cuts that you just described, the resources available to people who even make these journeys is little to none. I mean, this is literally people being left, as Lindsay said, to wander across the unshaded deserts of Africa to find a place to sleep and some water. Forget about education and health care.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is the minimal. Oh, sorry.
Go on, Ann.
No, I was going to say this is the minimal promise or the minimal aim of UN agencies, of USAID. The minimal aid has always been, and the minimal promise was to try and keep people alive. This is not democracy promotion. This is not economic development. This is not some complex program, of dubious value. This is not heavy bureaucracy. I mean, this is literally providing people with food and water. And this is something that, because of the Trump administration's cuts, we are no longer able to do.
Lindsay, one of your pictures is particularly poignant. It shows a woman carrying her 2-month-old son moments after arriving at the border in Tinea. The caption notes that Fatima's husband was killed in the attack on Zamzam. She and her son walked for 2 weeks to the Chad border. Tell me about this as we look at this picture.
The sad thing about this photo is that she was not alone. There were so many women who came to me and said their husband was executed either in front of them or they went to find their husband's body. And Fatima was there with her baby. Again, I think it's important to reiterate that they are arriving to nothing. At this point, UNHCR has been able to move, I think, about 20,000 of the 50,000 people who have come across in the last few weeks, most of them fleeing Zamzam and El Fasher, and the rest of them are are staying in this transit camp where people generally only stay one day, if that, because they had the resources to move them. Now they're staying up to 10 days with no shelter, no food, and no water. So you have a community, the local Chadian community is organizing whatever they can in terms of hot meals. There are these emergency response rooms that are creating hot meals for people, feeding up to 1,700 people a day. But you can imagine when you bring food to 20,000 people who haven't eaten in days, It is complete chaos. People are desperate.
I want to talk to you about another image that you took, Lindsay. It shows hungry Sudanese refugees, as you just described, running after a truck. I'm going to assume that's got food in it. It's got bags that look like food. Talk to us about this.
Yeah, we went back to the border about 4 or 5 times in the week. And I noticed on the first day around 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, there was one of these trucks. And I started seeing people running toward the truck. So the next day, I sort of positioned myself to be in a place and anticipated that truck. And lo and behold, when it came, people dropped everything and just started running and running. And when I arrived to the place where the truck had stopped, it's chaos. People are tripping over each other. Children are crying, screaming. Everyone is carrying a bowl. And of course, there's not enough food to feed the thousands and thousands of people. But whoever gets there first gets the food. And the hope is that more money will come to be able to feed more people.
Thank you to both of you for doing this. It's an important story. And Lindsay, this has been the case for years. The fact that you can put images in front of us does help us understand. Sometimes we can talk about who's on what side of which issue, but it's really just humans we need to be worrying about. So thanks to both of you. And it is always good to have you here. And thank you for helping us understand what some of these stories are. Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Lindsay Addario and Pulitzer Prize winning historian and staff writer for The Atlantic.